when it's like the podcast starts in the middle of the conversation like we are right now. And it's like
I love it.
we had begun talking about like your background in athletic training and, you getting more into like the strength and conditioning realm. And I'm really pumped to move this conversation into mobility, mind the gap. Can you get into that for us, Brett?
Absolutely. So, I coach, I believe in a pretty minimalist style of training. I'm not going to show you 150 exercises. There's about 6 to 10 things that I want you to be good at. And so there's a ton of benefit. Da Vinci said simplification is the ultimate sophistication. So it's inch wide, mile deep perspective. We have a saying in the Strong First Manual from a spec ops operator. The elite are just better at the basics than everybody else. So a narrow set, that inch wide, mile deep that you referenced when we were talking, there's a ton of benefit to that. However, there are gaps that show up. And at the most kind of fundamental level, when we look at what movements or mobility stuff should we have access to? Ankles, hips, T-spine. If you've got those 3 areas dialed in, and I'm going to leave the neck in the realm of the physical therapists, chiropractors, and folks that get paid more than I do to deal with that area. But from a fundamental level, ankles, hips, T-spine. And I think what's interesting right now, and in particular with ankles, is you have this misunderstanding of stiffness as it relates to sprinting. And people will say, well, I want that ankle stiffness. Don't confuse the tissue response that we're looking for with the joint range of motion that just supports healthy movement. If you have less than 35 degrees of active ankle dorsiflexion, or you have more than a 5-degree asymmetry between those ankles, it's a musculoskeletal risk factor, period. And I make very few declarative statements because nobody puts baby in a corner. Crazy for Swayze, baby. But I think that's a super important area. Fundamental hip mobility supports everything else. T-spine mobility not only supports a ton of lower body function, but it's also how we get good scapular function for going overhead. So those 3 areas, if we keep a good eye on those, a lot of other things tend to fall into place. But, and I'm not a garage kept single owner that was only driven to church. I'm a 54-year-old cancer survivor that's got a little bit of mileage on the chassis. And so I like to joke now, I have time for less training. I don't have time for less prep. There are things I know I need to do to get ready for my training, and I will not skip those because I know the benefits that it gives me. So I follow a very minimalist routine, but I have a targeted mobility platform that keeps me moving really well, feeling good. I've been in the position of not feeling good, and I can tell you scientifically, feeling good feels good. And so that's, a focus in the training. So I think if we keep it simple and we address that, I'm not a, classically trained athletic trainer. I've put the goniometer on all the joints and, measured this, that, and the other thing. And, when you pull back, and I'm an FMS guy, so you look at it from that FMS perspective, there are global patterns that give us actually a lot more information than isolated joint range of motion. Because if you look at me, I have no hip internal rotation. I got square pegs and round holes, high alpha angle, cam style FAI, all kinds of mileage around the hips. I'm never going to have internal rotation at the hips. I perform pretty well without it because your body will accept like one big restriction. Start adding another one, add a third, you're just out of room. Something's gonna break. So I think keeping it simple, looking at those, major mobility areas, gives us a real good starting point.
So with that specifically, I really like how you were talking about you were looking for 6 to 10 things that you want someone to be good at.
Mm-hmm.
What are those 6 to 10 things specifically, or is that too robust of a question? Would we have to look at the specific goal, the population you're working with, beginner, intermediate, advanced?
Um, Actually, it can be a pretty generic conversation. I think people get confused and they're looking for some secret sauce or some secret exercise that a sprinter will do or this person will do. Until you're at a nationally competitive level, an elite level, a lot of basic training works. And that was one of the big confusions with GPP versus SPP when the Russian system started becoming popular. GPP covers everything. GPP is not the Metcon at the end of your workout. GPP covers all the physical qualities and capacities. SPP is what you do on that last 10% of training that is specific to the things that you might need to be good at in your sport. If you're a martial artist and you need to be able to kick, there's some specific things we can get into for that. But there's a ton of foundational stuff that goes to everybody. And so the get up, the deadlift in some fashion, the kettlebell swing, I got to keep track because I said 10 and now I got to make up 10. Um, so,
And that's perfectly fine.
yeah.
I do think that's perfectly fine because you're saying like, okay, like if we're going to look at everyone as a whole, and then obviously there's specialization involved, what would you like to see people be foundational in, have the mobility to be there safely, just honestly to go through their activities, daily living, and to live with as little pain as possible. So I think that's very fair of you to say.
Absolutely. So get up, deadlift, and I may say single leg deadlift again because it's that important. The swing, the military press. Well, to military press a kettlebell, you got to be able to do the clean. So that's a twofer. We get the clean in there as part of the press. I want you to be able to squat. Some sort of pull up, some sort of row, some sort of lower body exercise, whatever your calf thing is. You can get there. And actually, I just finished filming the Iron Cardio Volume 2, and I don't know when this podcast will come out, and I might be ruining all of the secrecy that I've built around the second volume of the Iron Cardio. Not that what I'm about to say has anything to do with that, but split stance, lunging, step ups, rear foot elevated split squat. So in that sort of 8 to 10 things, there's almost a unlimited number of combinations and things that you can come up with that. And in that foundation, there's not anywhere I can't take somebody.
How do you feel about, because I like how you put in the split squat and then a regular squat, you put in a deadlift, and did you also say single leg deadlift as well?
Oh yeah.
So how do you feel right now when you go to, I don't know if you go to like commercial gyms or how dialed into our social media you are, but what do you think about bilateral movements and unilateral movements? How important are they? Not important? Because I think people look out of whatever window they want to look out of. They want to look out of complete strength. They want to look out of hypertrophy. Other people are looking at a well-rounded approach, looking at kinesthetic senses, balance, proprioception. How do you feel about the bilateral and unilateral movements?
It's a fantastic conversation. And, Coach Mike Boyle has been really at the forefront of pushing the single leg bilateral deficit / emphasis on single leg training. And I think there's a lot of good things to be said for that. I think there's still a lot of there are athletic applications where we're on 2 feet, and we need to be able to move well within those platforms or within that foot stance. FMS, we break it down by symmetrical stance, single leg stance, and asymmetrical stance or split stance. So within those, you cover most athletic movements, postures, positions. And from a strength gap perspective, I would say that single leg strength is one of the biggest gaps for the general trainee. I've done my time under the barbell, 518 raw squat in competition at 198. I pulled 573 in the deadlift, but I keep single leg deadlifts, airborne lunge, some sort of lunging work in the mix, because I know. And the funny thing was, I'd gotten down the path, ended up having my right knee scoped at the end of 2019, and I had heard it in 2006. So I had kind of 2004. Sorry, a little edit there. So I had managed this thing actually pretty well for 15 years. And then I also had a medial collateral, probably grade 3, 2.5 to 3. My right knee just garden gates. And that was from a 6th grade wrestling injury. Well, I decided to try pulling some sumo as I was getting ready for something that I was doing. And boy, my knee blew up the next day. It progressed. I ended up having to have it scoped. Well, in the process of getting ready to have it scoped, I had started back down the path of putting in a lot more single leg deadlifting into the mix. I reached a point where I was like, I don't know if I need to have this scoped. Like, this is actually really good. And so I had gone a little bit too far down that pathway of having just too much symmetrical stance work and not enough single leg work. And, when I do something like a Mind the Gap or Iron Cardio or something like that, it's what I'm doing. Like, I'm not making up products to sell. I'm simply telling you what I'm doing and how I approach this. And so I'm a big fan of having that single leg strength in there. Gray said for a long time, if I can get you to half body weight in a single arm, single leg deadlift for 8 to 10 reps each leg, I think we got some pretty good horsepower that we can work with.
It's funny. I'm having Mike Boyle on in 2 weeks from now, and I can't wait to ask him about single leg versus double leg and all like the bilateral deficits which people have, because I've heard him talk about this at length.
Yeah.
And just to kind of see like maybe how does that change throughout people's aging? How do people go about that outside of the sporting context? Because you had said like a lot of general public people have these bilateral deficits, and it would very much benefit them to do more single leg training. And then there's the whole school of other people barking, saying like, you don't need to do that. And it's like, well, there's a lot more considerations that you need to look at before making that recommendation online.
1,000%. And I just think, to the idea of Mind the Gap, that's just a big strength gap that you can fill. Like, it doesn't have to be there. And when you realize, as you get into either mobility changes and strength changes, you realize you were pushing 70-30 through your symmetrical stance work because one of your legs was not up to snuff. And so that there's a deadly assumption in there that if I'm doing bilateral work, of course I'm putting force equally into the ground. No, that does not have to be the case. You can easily be 60-40, and that doesn't sound like enough of a difference to cause a problem. It is, and so keeping tabs on your single leg work is essential.
It's interesting too. There's I remember speaking with one of my friends about it during grad school that they had blown out their ACL twice and in like the same leg. And I was like, well, why did that happen? And they're like, oh, I'm very quad dominant. And I was like, quad dominant? And it just opened my eyes to like this whole line of research that a lot of people are quad dominant and maybe don't do enough hamstring and or glute work to support whatever sport that they're doing. So when they're sprinting, stopping, cutting, changing directions, that's when we're seeing a lot of these issues with the soft tissue. Have you seen that in the past as well?
Yeah, I mean, I'm old enough and been doing this long enough that I remember the accelerated ACL protocols where we were putting kids back on the field after 3 months, 4 months of rehab. And like nowadays it's like, oh my gosh, we were so far out ahead of our ski tips. We lost perspective. Now we understand it's a solid year for that tissue to really transform and heal and be functional as a support mechanism and neurological mechanism within that knee. two things tend to happen in ACL rehab in the past. People do a really good job rehabbing a knee, forgetting that it's attached to the rest of the body. So we got really good at saying this knee is now back to function. What about the rest of the person? You could have, was there a deficit on the other leg that was causing them to overload that side and hence put them at risk for that? Was there an ankle mobility issue? Was there a hip strength issue? I mean, you could even have a T-spine issue and lack of the joint by joint approach coming up through that puts that person at risk. And so the blinders that kind of get put on that we're rehabbing a shoulder, we're rehabbing a knee, was a problem in ACL rehab, I would say. And getting back to function, just because your isokinetic test came back good and your measurements, your quad measurements come up to snuff, I mean, you're ready to function. So there's been a lot of progress in the last few years, and just a much greater understanding of the healing time that's required and the function that needs to be regained.
What would you like to see as far as the conversation and protocols change around rehabbing some of these injuries?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an FMS guy, so I think you know what I'm going to say. You got to have a baseline. If you're going to say that this person's ready, what's the movement baseline that they need to clear? If you've done research or looked into the YBT, where's their YBT score? What was it prior to injury? What is it after injury? There are metrics and baselines that we can put into place that if somebody's injured, we can go back and say, okay, well, this was your movement profile before. Let's make sure we get you above that movement profile now. This was your stabilization strategy or motor control strategy before, YBT related. Let's reestablish that. Let's make sure that we're checking that box. Carmen Bott, Coach Bott, is doing some really good ACL rehab conversations now. And I think and maybe she'll validate this, or she'll say Brett doesn't know what he's talking about. But she's become an expert in this, not because she wanted to, but because it just kind of fell in her lap, and she just, got placed in the position of having to do this stuff. So I think as you build back through there, if you've got your baselines in place, or you just set baselines post rehab, and you know that people should be over X. There's, 60, 70,000 data points in the YBT database that can give you age and sport specific sort of range that people typically operate in. And then, you're going to get your bilateral strength back. You're going to do a ton of single leg work, check the boxes on ankle, hip, and T-spine, and then get into activities that are going to replicate the stresses that people are going to be put under.
With the concept of mind the gap, did you get that from the London Underground, by the way?
Basically,
Okay.
that was kind of too many Monty Python movies as a kid, and it just kind of made sense to say, hey, mind the gap. Do you have gaps in your training? And if you don't know how to kind of establish that or check that, here's some ways that you can look at mobility, stability, and strength, and know that if you've got some gaps to fill, there's some efficient ways to do that. I think that's one of the fears when you start talking about filling gaps. People see their program going from the nice minimalist routine to a 50 exercise gauntlet that they just don't have time to perform anymore. And little doses done consistently covers a lot of ground.
It's interesting because anyone who has had clients over the years, depending on, it doesn't matter like what age, what their goal is, a lot of times with general periodization models, if it's like undulating periodization, it's a mesocycle that's 4 weeks to 8 weeks, whatever it is, you basically keep the exact same exercises in there and you look to advance on those exercises to progressively overload.
Mm-hmm.
And one common complaint that we've all gotten is like, can we change it up? this is getting a little boring, or I don't like this movement, or why don't things change? And the answer is because these mostly compound movements, and then there's obviously a time and a place for the single leg movements or the unilateral movements, they work. And as you had said before, which I love how you put it, that the elites are just better at the basics than beginners. And that's one of those things that, like, I don't know if that's ever, that belief system is ever going to be thrown out, so to speak, where people just want the next fanciest ab exercise. And it's like, no, we might have like 2 or 3 which work really well, and do that a few days a week for the next 50 years and trust the process.
Yeah, I mean, boy, I can go a few different directions in this conversation. To the concept of periodization and everything, the typical reason you see about a 6 to 8 week mesocycle within periodized work is we know within the first 2 weeks you get this really quick neurological adaptation with any particular exercise, sets, reps, blah blah blah. We get a big neurological uptick. Well, it takes another arguably 4 or more weeks to stabilize that gain. So when people switch exercises, what they're looking for is the next hit, because that quick response in that first 2 weeks, you're like, holy man, that was amazing. I want more of that. And so they'll switch exercises and they get that little 2 week bump, and they switch exercises and they get that 2 week bump. And then you get to the end of that and you have no benefit because, yeah, you had that quick bump. You didn't stabilize it. If it's quickly gained, it's quickly lost. So whatever you think you accomplished in that first 2 weeks, cool, it's no longer there because you switched, you didn't stabilize. So from a real base standpoint, if somebody wants to get pedantic within the periodization models, that's why you see those 6 to 8 week mesocycles, because you need that time to stabilize those gains. And if you want to switch and just not stabilize any gains, I mean, I guess you can do that. Olympic lifters spend entire 10, 20, 30-year careers trying to get better at 2 exercises. Okay, it's 3. The clean's in there. But like, it's an entire career to get better at 2 exercises. Powerlifters spend an entire career trying to get better at squatting, benching, deadlifting. What do baseball players do? They throw a ball, they catch a ball, they hit a ball, they run. Has anybody added something? Okay, they jump. Has anybody added anything to the mix? Boxers throw 4 punches. Like, tell me you don't need variety, right? It's in your sport, there's going to be enough variety. Within your strength conditioning, you actually need consistency and some sort of progressive model.
What have you said to, what's your advice, or what do you say to people, clients, students, whomever, who have that all too common complaint? Is it somewhere around there, or will you kind of forecast it in the sense of like, you want to get here, but currently you're here? We can decrease that margin between where you are right now and where you want to get to, but sometimes it's going to take those tiny incremental gains.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's depending on who I'm working with, my relationship with them. I will tell them, I know you feel like you need to do something different, and I don't care about your feelings because I know what you need and where I'm trying to take you. And if your goal is to get better at X, I call me crazy, but we should probably do that. Now, having said that, where movement variability and fun and this thing that keeps people engaged, that's your movement prep, that's Indian clubs, that's battling ropes, that's there's a ton of things that you can throw in, pardon me, that are not going to really take away from the main training effect, but it's going to give the appearance of variety that will move that person forward. And I within like the Iron Cardio protocol or Iron Cardio program and thing that I've been working on, I've been following the same routine, the same program for over 5 years now. When was the last program you followed for 5 years? Right? I clean a bell, I press a bell, I squat, I snatch. somewhere in the mix of that, I do just fine in my training. So I think as people almost kind of unlearn that variety mindset, there's much better training and there's much greater results to be had. And that's the other thing I will tell them is that, variety isn't entertaining. Results are entertaining. And if we would like to get better at this and get some results, we need to do this for a while.
It's funny because there's this idea right now, swimming around on like a couple different podcasts, and I love the conversation of don't, I might butcher it, but it's like, don't ask someone, what's it like at the top of the mountain? What are you doing right now? You ask the question of what was your journey like? What was it like when you were at the bottom, when you first started beginning? And I love that with respect to like running, because I do like marathons and ultra marathons and stuff. And the amount of like people I've coached to run 5Ks, 10Ks, halves, falls, ultras, whatever, it's the people in the beginning who, when I try to get them to run 10 miles a week, upwards of maybe 15 or 20 miles a week, it's more of the neurological or psychological component of the wall I'm trying to break down with them of like, hey, do you want to be a great marathoner to qualify for Boston or to run 100 miles? You're just going to have to do more and more and more and more and more and more and more of the exact same thing. Yeah, we can cross train. We can hit the bike. We can do the pool. We can do strength training a couple days a week and do some foam rolling and stretching. But you want to qualify for Boston, run 60, 70, 80, 90 miles a week, maybe 100 miles a week, whatever like your time allocation is, whatever your body allows you to do. Some people love that and they love the process and they fall in love with it. Other people, it's excuse, excuse, excuse. And I think like the best person to ever exemplify that was like Arnold. Like Arnold talked about like 5 or 6 movements that he liked. And he said, I just did more of them than you did. And I was like, yep, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, it really doesn't have to be any more complicated than that. And, I think, people will, and Alan Cosgrove is a really good person to talk to on some things like this. And I saw something recently where, he put out a program that was, just kettlebell swings, and people were like, oh, one exercise, you blah, blah, blah. And he's like, nobody questions a routine that just has running in it. Like nobody says that's not going to work because it's only one exercise. So why can't we bring that over here? And yeah, if you want to get good at something, yeah, you're going to do it. I think that, like for me, when I get into my kettlebell practice, I learn something every time I lay a hand on the bell. It's not a mindless practice. It's engaged. It's mindful. It is me learning something. And I think that we've gotten a little too divorced from the skill and the learning aspect of these things, even within, and especially within running. Because running it's easy to do poorly, and you can do a lot of it poorly, or you can learn how to run well. And that takes mindfulness and dedication and practice. And, zipping up a kettlebell clean into the perfect loaded position to optimize your press. That is a skill that I'm still working on 22 years down the road, 23 years down the road. I learn something every time I lay a hand on the bell. And that was, Dr. Ed Thomas, who was one of my mentors with Indian clubs and a couple of things. He said, I never went to the gym to work out. I went to the gym to learn. Now, in the process of learning, did I get sweaty, fit, tired, and have all those side benefits? Yeah, that wasn't the goal. The goal was to learn the next progression. The goal was to refine that skill. That was the goal. And so if we started approaching training as an opportunity to learn and build skill, I think we'd have a different training experience.
What is it about kettlebells that you like about so much?
Oh boy. Okay. 3-4 elevator speech, thick handle, offset center of gravity. The bell is literally more alive in your hand and something that needs to be worked with. The offset center of mass when it sits on the back of the arm is literally going to guide you into better positions as you go through something like a military press or a get-up. It is that 6 to 8 inch displacement. It changes what you're able to do and leads into the eccentric position that we can get into with the bell, this loaded overspeed eccentric position where you absorb and redirect force very quickly. I've been on a force plate 2-arm swing with a 24 kilo bell, producing 3 to 3.5 times my body weight eccentric load at the bottom of the swing. 53-pound weight, giving me 3.5 times my body weight eccentric load. That's a pretty good return on investment. And it allows me to start dealing with some really high forces with no impact and with a really athletic application. So that overspeed eccentric, unique loaded eccentric position, the displaced center of mass, the thick handle, it is a very different tool. A dumbbell, barbell, center of mass is going to line up with your hand. Great for what it's great for. But those just unique benefits of the kettlebell that don't apply to any other tool. There's a lot there.
Where would people want to get started out with kettlebells? Because with dumbbells, it's like so easy with like, oh, 5s, 10s, 15s, 20s. With kettlebells, it's always going to be like a little bit different. If you were to set up a program for someone, and obviously you do, like, and someone's like listening into this when I release the podcast and they're like, well, I really like the idea of kettlebell training, but I don't know where to start. If I could get 3 different weights and I could do 3 different movements, how would you guide them on that path?
Get Kettlebell Simple and Sinister from Pavel, or get Iron Cardio from me. Yeah, that was a shameless self-promotion.
Flash it across the screen.
Yeah, I don't feel good about myself right now. No, I mean, those are 2 really simple products that give you a lot of starting information. Invest in a training session with a strong first certified instructor. I mean, save yourself 6 months of trying to figure this out. In 1 to 3 sessions, I can have you doing a get up, hitting your swings, and really, starting to make progress and doing it safely. There's a general blueprint for how we do these exercises. The skill of a coach is to build that blueprint in a way that works with you and your structure and your history and the gaps that you might need to fill. And so, those are the first 2 big things. You want some information to guide you. Totally get it. 2 products that can go a long way there. Get some coaching. If you just have a single W-2 and you can do TurboTax or whatever service online and get your taxes done, congratulations. For most of the rest of the world, you got to have an accountant do your taxes. Get a coach. Get some training. Doesn't have to be a lifetime. You can get off to a really good start. Weight wise, I got to know a little bit more about the individual. What is their background in strength conditioning? Are we starting from 0? Did they lift weights in high school? Do they have are they currently training and just looking to add a new tool to the repertoire? Somewhere in the 16 to 24 kilo range will fit a lot of guys. Somewhere in the 8 to 16 kilo range will fit a lot of ladies. And so, if you get an 8, 12, and 16, you get a 16, 20, 24, you've probably got a lot of room to grow. Now, if you're a big, strong person, guy or gal, and you're in the gym clanging and banging and, throwing around a bunch of weight, you might want to aim a little higher. But that's, again, the benefit of getting in and working with a coach is you're going to get to test those weights. Kettlebells are not cheap, especially nowadays. And so shipping's brutal. Like if you can get the opportunity to test and know which weights you need, then a lot better starting point.
Are they more expensive than a regular dumbbell, which used to be $1 per pound and now it's closer to like $2 a pound?
I'm going to sound either ignorant or smart here in a second. I honestly don't know. I know they're more expensive. I know they're more expensive with tariffs and things like that. And there's a lot of different options nowadays. I mean, back 20 plus years ago when I got started, there was one kettlebell producer. And, a lot of people have shown up on the scene since then. And it just, there's such a variety. You're going to find a ton of different prices. I prefer the cast style with either the E-coating. The E-coat kettlebells are really nice. So yeah, a lot of options there, and prices. We don't know where tariffs are going to take prices. We can assume higher. So,
based on like what we've been talking about with mobility and your background in athletic training and kettlebells and strength work, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about cardiovascular training or endurance training and how you call
sure.
it iron cardio.
Huh?
What is this?
So it's clickbaity.
I love the title.
Yeah, the name is essentially meant to be a little clickbaity, and I love it every time I talk about it, because there's an exercise physiologist somewhere in the world right now whose head is just getting ready to explode, and they're going to be having a very visceral reaction to this idea that you lift weights and do cardio. So it works in many ways for me. Essentially. And there's a few different ways that we can kind of break this down. There are central and there are peripheral cardiovascular adaptations. Central cardiovascular adaptations would be a little more associated with your traditional cardiovascular training. You're running, you're biking, you're rowing, you're whatever, whatever your flavor is. Left ventricular hypertrophy, stroke volume, blah, blah, blah. Well, there's a whole host of peripheral adaptations that go along with capitalization and metabolic efficiency and several other areas. I think a lot of the strength training work and iron, we'll get into a couple details here in a second, but with the iron cardio work, the efforts are brief enough and the emphasis changes enough to where we avoid some of the problems of doing heavy strength training for cardiovascular adaptation. Because the big problem we run into when somebody says, "Oh, I'm going to do sets of 10 in the squat for my cardio." Yeah, your heart rate, you get a heart rate response. The problem is the volume load and the pressure load become very, very different under load. So when we're doing a traditional cardiovascular activity, and we'll just use the bike as an example, that rhythmically repetitive, really kind of, we'll call it low pressure work. There's that rhythmically repetitive muscular action returns a lot of blood to the heart. So in that big amount of blood coming back to the heart, we get a nice stretch of the left ventricle. We get a nice contraction of the left ventricle, and we actually get this pliable yet strong left ventricle that moves blood out around the body very efficiently. When we go under load, for example, a heavy back squat or a higher rep, whatever, now, because we're generating tension throughout the body, we have a lot less blood coming back. So now, instead of getting a nice big stretch of the left ventricle, we kind of just got enough coming back in. But now, because we're under so much pressure, the heart has to pump super hard to get the blood back out into the system. Well, that volume load and pressure load and the way that changes what's happening at the heart means heavy strength training can create a lot of problems for cardiovascular adaptation. And we see this from time to time. And I think anytime you get too far on one side of the scale, you end up with some problems. So the way I think we avoid that in something like iron cardio is I have a 3 to 5 reps per set metric. Your military press size bell is going to be your limiting factor. So actually it's a pretty light clean. It's a pretty light squat. It might be a 5 or 6 RM on your military press. So none of this is like max load sort of things. So an 8 to 12 second effort is what you're going to be doing. Finish it clean, go into your press, come back down, go into your squat, throw in a snatch or not. And then a bunch of different permutations off of that. So we have this switching from ballistic to strength, finishing with a ballistic. So we have this rotation of efforts and the way the load is going through the body that I think avoids a lot of that volume load and pressure load issue with using strength training for cardiovascular adaptation. I'm a little more concerned with what's happening with the heart in between sets, not necessarily in the set. And I think the swing itself, probably the most apt connection would be rowing. We know that when you come in and you come forward in your rowing stroke and you go to push back, there's this big moment of pressurization that your heart has to contract through. And then you get to do your rowing stroke. Swing's pretty similar. We have this eccentric load position where we're going to catch and have that intra-abdominal pressure. And then we're going to have this, we got to, as Stu McGill calls it, we got to have our pulse, and then our pulse at the end to deliver the energy. We've got a good bit of relaxation in between. So I think there's some really good things happening within things like the swing and the snatch and things like that that would be comparable in a way to rowing. So yeah, the iron cardio thing, a little clickbaity, but I think in the realm of peripheral adaptations and the way I want the protocol done, we still get some really good adaptations. And I'm a big fan of getting your zone 2 work in and getting your swings in, and not being just one thing.
What's interesting with powerlifters specifically, and maybe like strongman competitors, is that there's a whole host of factors which could predispose them to future cardiovascular events. One of them is just body size. A lot of these folks are enormous. Second, if PED use is on board, that's huge. If there's some supplementation of like pre-workouts or caffeinated beverages besides like coffee, that can have some issues. Maybe diet's an issue. And then, as you had said, with the Valsalva maneuver, just doing that again and again and again while not doing your zone 2 cardio, that can be a recipe for disaster. So you have someone who's like addicted to going to the gym, but you're like, yeah, but you're not healthy. Like I would rather have like the mall walker who like doesn't really lift weights, but it's like constantly cardio, but they only weigh 135 pounds, as opposed to like the enormous, strongman competitor who's like doing things they shouldn't be doing and predisposing their heart to get a heart attack or eccentric hypertrophy or something like that. So it is interesting, but I like the point that you brought up there with like the zone 2 cardio of how important that is too. And the Valsalva maneuver over time is not exactly the best thing for the anatomy of the heart, so to speak.
Yeah. And, the pulling it out into the aging conversation just a little bit, the reason a lot of older folks will pass out, and the classic is they pass out on the toilet, right? They go to bear down, their heart's not strong enough to pump through the pressure, and they pass out. The body hits the red reset switch, and they go out for a little bit. That's a weak heart, right? There is a level of cardiovascular stress and stress under load that builds a very healthy, very strong heart. Masayama said the extra meat didn't do the cow any more good than it will you. And martial arts traditionally tend in the leaner category. Anytime you're excess weight, whether it's muscle or fat, not a great end of the spectrum to be on long term. And you see a lot of football players and other competitors who will drop weight, once they're done with their sport and whatever other things they were doing to help maintain that sort of weight. And so I think there's definitely it's when you're in the midst of trying to accomplish something, as a strongman competitor, as a power lifter, as an Olympic lifter, as a runner, as a, long term can become very way out there, something that I don't need to worry about right now. And there will be some things that come up in life. For me, it was cancer that do kind of wake you up a little bit. Pulmonary embolism before that, and then I've had some things, and so you have some things happen, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this isn't that important. I get the goal. I get the accomplishment. Don't nobody send me hate mail. But you know, I want to still be doing this when I'm 70, when I'm 80. Yeah, I want to be living independently and taking care of myself to a ripe old age. And there are some goals that endanger that.
what was the cancer like?
Hell. Um, so I had a melanoma. That was easy. That was just a surgery and sentinel node biopsy, and everything was fine. Primary tonsillar squamous cell carcinoma stage 3. Had 7 weeks of radiation and 2 chemo infusions, and lost over 40 pounds of weight during treatment. I mean, really, if it hadn't been for my wife and the great care she was taking care of, that she was giving me, I don't know if I would have made it through. So it was hard. It was, and admittedly, I was fat going into treatment. I had put on some extra weight and lost a ton of tissue in the process of treatment. Had I not had that tissue to sacrifice, I probably would have ended up with a feeding tube. And for throat cancer, and when you're receiving radiation, that's a peg tube that goes straight into your stomach. Lots of infections and problems. It's not a great thing to have to do. I was able to avoid that. But yeah, it was bad. And then that's actually where iron cardio really came from, was, in the process of building my strength back up and getting back to training. Nobody had to tell me I needed to get back to training, right? I love training. I love being strong. It's something that I just enjoy doing. So as I started down that journey, I ended up rebooting one of Pavel and Alexei Sinart's articles, Strength Aerobics, a powerful alternative to HIIT. And then I started building out all of these different variants and permutations and perspectives and with it. And so I was able to build out this whole program. And that's how I rebuilt my strength and have been doing it for a few years now.
So you were your own scientist and your own coach, so to speak.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know some people will say, well, if we speak in the legal sense, if you have, if you're defending yourself, if you're your own lawyer, you have an idiot for a client. I don't agree with that so much within the training realm. I think there's a level of exploration, intuition, and learning that happens only when you're doing it for yourself. And that's something I talk about in the book, is the difference between intuitive and structured trainees. I'm an intuitive trainee. Pavel, Fabio, and the people I work with, nobody sends me exercise plans to experiment with because they know I won't follow them. I will get back in touch with them and tell them what I did with it after the fact. But I'm not a good program follower. I've done it successfully at times, but it doesn't fit me mentally. There's other people that I know. Fabio Zonin, one of our Strong First Master instructors and great friend of mine, very structured trainee. He's got the spreadsheets. He's got the calculations done. He knows what he's doing for the next X number of weeks and whatnot. My brain doesn't work like that. I literally sit down in front of a blank piece of paper and go, what do I want to do today? And I put together a thing that I'm going to do, for that day. So I think there's an intuitiveness and a learning that occurs when you're doing it for yourself that is separate from the structured work that you'd be receiving from a coach, where you're supposed to follow the plan. There's times to follow the plan, right? And I'm sitting here with 30 plus years of experience and 23 years of experience with kettlebells and saying, oh yeah, you should be intuitive in your training. Well, yeah, I've been doing this a little while, right? You might have some structured time to start learning how to be intuitive. And the way I refer to it in the book is if you think you're structured, but you always have trouble accomplishing your goals, you might want to try some intuitive training. If you think you're intuitive and have trouble accomplishing your goals, you probably need a bit more structure. And so, it's not a right or wrong conversation. It's we should probably surf that continuum just a little bit more.
Was it a bit exciting and humbling to work your way back up to get a ton of strength coming back after getting what I assume was cancer, cachexia, from the radiation and the chemotherapy? You lost 40 pounds. You weren't mentally or physically as strong and resilient as you thought you were, but then you battled your way back. It was you who did that. You built
Yep.
your own program, and now you're like, hey, I'm on the top of the mountain, baby.
Well, I'm doing okay for where I am. And the thing you learn, one of the things you learn is that no day is guaranteed to anyone. Things could change tomorrow, and I can do everything in the world I want to do to try to prevent that, and it'll happen anyway. Doesn't stop me from doing everything I can do to prevent that, but you have to realize life is going to happen. So yeah, I mean, I feel really good about the journey that I've been on and what I've been able to accomplish. And it's, being strong, building strength. The strong first mantra of strength has a greater purpose. And really, when you're challenged in ways like this, now, while I had some extra tissue on me, I was in pretty good shape going into treatment. That allowed me to do better in treatment than people who were not in as good a condition would have done. And so, coming back, getting strong again, then that's, I think we joked in the beginning maybe that feeling good feels good, and that's pretty much my major training goal right now. Is I want to feel good. Now, do I train with some intensity? I train to a good level for me, but my goal is to feel good. If my training starts taking me out of that, I know I need to change something.
So moving forwards, what would you like to see with regard for advances in the field? And this is a very robust question I'm asking you, because you love what you do. You've helped a lot of people, and I'm sure you've inspired a lot of people too. We've talked about athletic training. We've talked about mobility, mind the gap, and all the mobility issues with thoracic spine, ankles, and
Hips.
hips,
Yep.
and even just like the iron cardio approach, which I do think now that I'm like looking back on, I'm like, I think there's a lot of scientific truth to that, and I really like it. What would you like to see in the next 5 to 10 years if you had a little bit more sway on the population as a whole? How would you try and change that for the positive?
Um, I'll go in a couple of different categories. From an end user standpoint, um, it's arguable that only 15 to 20% of the U.S. population exercises. That has to change. That's not we should do better at that. No, that has to change. The challenges we're seeing to metabolic health and just overall health in general, and how powerful a tool exercise is. We have to have people coming out of their formative educational years knowing how to manage this thing that we're given, this meat suitcase that we get to drive around the universe. How do we manage that over time? We should be educating kids, and in those formative years, they should receive education that will take them through a lifetime of being able to manage this. And that's understanding lifestyle, sleep, hydration, nutrition, and stress. That's understanding exercise, both cardiovascular and strength training. And it's having a foundational knowledge that can support that individual through a lifetime. Now, they want to go further into powerlifting, Olympic lifting, running, whatever the case may be. Cool. They should have a foundation that can get them started in that direction. For the professional, and I'll start with the strength training or the personal training professional. We need some standards. I like nobody likes it when those words come out of my mouth, right? The personal trainers in particular. Your education doesn't trump my experience. I didn't say it did. I said as a profession, we need some standards. There are professions that have standards that massage therapy being a really good example, and a group that went through the painful process of getting to state licensure and establishing educational models and expectations that have led to an elevation of that profession. If we want to be taken seriously as a profession, we should establish standards. We should have educational minimums. I actually think the massage therapy model is not the worst one in the world for personal trainers to look at, and having a base education and practical experience time frame, 500 hours, 600 hours of work, an associate's degree sort of situation that leads to the ability to work within this field. And again, nobody wants me to say that. Nobody in the industry right now is like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Get the government involved. But if we don't establish standards, because there's people that get involved in training, they look good, they enjoy training, so I'm going to get paid to work out. That's awful reason for getting into personal training. Personal training has a 3 month to 6 month to 3 year typical career span. It's a lot of burnout. It's not an easy profession. You are literally taking people's lives into your hands. And I say that, and people are like, yeah. I mean, you talk to somebody that's been on the police force for 30 years and they've never pulled their weapon. They're like, oh yeah, I never had to do it. There's a rookie that had to do it in their first 3 months and had a really bad experience. That's not a bad analogy for how things could go within the fitness world. We know bad things happen. Heart attacks happen in the morning. Whatever. You should be skilled in emergency action plans and response and have a base level of knowledge, and you should be able to handle these things, not just know what a bicep is. From a athletic training standpoint, I won't say much, but there is a drive towards being all DAT, Doctorate of Athletic Training, the same way PT went DPT. I think this is a massive mistake for the profession. Most people come out with an athletic training, and the NATA will probably send me a letter and say, thanks for being a member for 30 years, you're out. But I think that when the people that you're educating, who are currently now spending somewhere around a ballpark of $100,000 to come out with an athletic training degree, they come out making $35,000 to $40,000 a year. That's 60% of the athletic training force. They go to work at high school. They might be teaching or not. They're going to be in a low salary. They're going to work a ton of hours. And they've got this massive student loan debt to pay off. And you're going to make that upwards of $140,000 to $200,000 to get a DAT? Dude, what are you doing? And, I think there's nothing wrong with being specialist in what we're specialists at. I was proud of the fact as an athletic trainer that if something happened on the field, I could handle it. I've spine boarded kids. I've handled dislocated that and broken that and whatever. Like I've handled all of these different things, and I felt really good about the fact that me being on the field was a piece of the safety puzzle for those athletes that are out there doing it. I didn't care about wins and losses. I knew people that I was athletic trainers with, and if their team lost on Friday night, you just didn't want to be around them for the next 4 or 5 days. They were miserable. And I'm like, did any of your athletes get hurt? They're like, well, no. I'm like, well, then you should be smiling. You should be happy right now. So, I think there's obviously that covers a smattering of end user and personal training and athletic training, but I think there's always room to grow. Yeah. As Groucho Marx said, and I'll paraphrase him, he said, "These are my principles. If you don't like them, I have others. These are my opinions. If you don't like them, I have others."
Well, it's interesting with personal training. I can't tell you how many times, and you've had this too before, more times than me, obviously, where you'll be with a friend, a family member, whomever, working out, maybe you're in a commercial gym, and you're seeing the personal trainer putting someone in their 50s or 60s through a workout. And it happened to me about a month ago that I was with a friend at the gym, and the personal trainer was putting this maybe 60-year-old man, pretty obese, on the leg extension machine. And he wanted him to do a triple drop set. And he's like, yeah, come on, you just got 2 more sets. All right, come on, you just got 2 more sets. Yeah, breathe, just get it out, get it. And I was like, this guy he probably has metabolic syndrome. He's got central adiposity, probably has high blood pressure, probably has hypertriglyceridemia. He probably has some, he's definitely dealing with sarcopenia, osteoporosis since the age of 30. There's so many predisposing risk factors, and you're yelling at this guy to do a triple drop set on the leg extension. You don't know anything. And my friend goes, does it piss you off that you're a doctor of human physiology and you have to see that? And I looked at him and I just put my earbud in and I was like, nope, it's not my legal issue. And I was like, I have to turn my head. I was like, no.
Yeah. I mean, it's maddening. And I think that, so 30,000 foot view, because that segues into that first conversation of getting more people to exercise. One of the two biggest reasons I would argue that people don't exercise is it doesn't feel good. And it doesn't feel good because they have a mobility, stability, or strength gap that is changing their performance and making exercise it's not even that they get injured. It doesn't feel good. Just for this amorphous, or it's my knees ache, or my back's sore. And people think exercise is torture. And the situation that you described is, in a nutshell, why people think exercise is torture. If I'm going to get something out of this, it has to suck. I enjoy my training every session, right? But I feel good. I move well. I'm able to perform, and do the things that I need to do. So if exercise doesn't feel good and you think it's supposed to suck, well, there's why 15% of the population only exercises. And the other 75-80% of the populations go, you people are nuts. Training doesn't have to hurt. Training doesn't have to suck. You can actually have well-structured and well-coached training that has you feeling good and performing well. And if more people had that experience, that 15% number would be much larger.
I love it. Brett, is there any closing thoughts or remarks before you tell everyone where they can find you, your information you put out, your programs?
Yeah, I don't know. Move well enough to move often. I'm going to just steal the FMS tagline right off of the stationery. Move well enough to move often. Don't flip that equation. The worst thing in the world is when somebody that hasn't exercised in a while and says, I'm going to start running so that I can get in shape. I mean, it might work out. Probably not. Get some coaching, get some help, identify those gaps, be in a better position to perform. And find something you like doing. I mean, I like kettlebells. You might not. You might groove on dumbbells, bodyweight exercise, Pilates, dance. Cool. You be you, man. You go find something that you enjoy, get after it, have fun with it. As long as you're not getting injured and you feel good and you're in that healthy state, this is going to sound weird, with a good grip strength, then I think you're in a good place. And grip strength is a turning out again and again and again to be a very robust biomarker for aging, sarcopenia, and performance. So, bet you weren't expecting that one.
I love the fact that you put that one in there, because that has been talked about a whole lot more recently with regard for strength equals longevity. What's one of the best predictors of strength? Grip strength.
Yeah. Great. And it doesn't mean you're sitting around squeezing grippers all day. It means the lifestyle and activities you take on build grip strength. Mm-hmm. So It's an indicator.
Brett, where can people find you and your programs?
Oh boy. So Instagram, at Brett Jones SFG. That's where I do. That's the only place I do stuff from a social
That's where
media.
I got in contact with you.
Exactly. That's where I do things. I have a website, appliedstrength.com or theironcardio.com. They both go to the same place. So whichever you type in, you're ending up at the same place. Those are the two best areas. And I'm starting work with a group called Kettlebell Transformation, where I'll be an online kettlebell transformation coach.
Awesome. Brett, thank you for coming on today. This was a really wonderful talk, and it led into different little side streets that I'm really happy it led to. This was great.
Awesome. Great to have. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you and your audience, and really appreciate it.
For sure.